My name is Marin Wells, and for most of my life, I've been the one people overlook. The older sister, the quiet one, the girl who got a job instead of a degree, who left home early and never looked back. In my family, that made me invisible, and somehow also an embarrassment. I wasn't supposed to stand out, especially not today, at my sister Marianne's wedding, an immaculate affair with champagne fountains, imported roses, and a guest list curated like a work of art. I showed up quietly, dressed with care, but not flash. I stayed near the back, smiled politely, and kept to myself. It still wasn't enough, because when Marianne's new father-in-law turned to greet me, he paused, looked me up and down, then ignored my outstretched hand like I wasn't even there. The people around us noticed, but no one said anything. Not my sister, not my mother. Just silence. That kind of silence has a weight to it. I've felt it before. But then I heard it, low, sharp, behind his shoulder. Wait, that's Marin Wells? Just like that, the air shifted. His posture straightened, heads turned, eyes searched mine like they were seeing something they hadn't expected. He didn't know who I was. But now, suddenly, he did, and I didn't have to explain a single thing. I learned early on that in our family, usefulness was valued more than presence. As the older sister, I was useful from the moment our dad left. Mom never called it abandonment. She said he transitioned out. Whatever euphemism she dressed it in, it meant I was 12 and folding laundry while she cried in the kitchen, and Marianne, barely 5, got to stay the baby. We were raised in the same house, but not the same world. I was expected to help. Marianne was expected to become someone. By the time she hit middle school, it was clear. She had the looks, the grades, the potential. Mom signed her up for everything. Ballet, piano, debate team. I worked 2 shifts at the local diner and picked her up afterwards. "You're so reliable, Marin," Mom would say. "She needs that kind of support." I didn't go to college. I got a job in accounting right after high school and worked my way up from data entry. No loans, no applause. No one asked me what I wanted. Every time I came home for the holidays, they'd ask if I was still doing that office thing. Meanwhile, Marianne's latest scholarship or award would be printed out and taped to the fridge like it was the family crest. I don't remember when I stopped trying to explain myself. Maybe it was the Christmas Mom gave Marianne a plane ticket to Paris and handed me a scented candle with a sticker still on it. Or maybe it was that dinner party when I brought a friend, someone kind, thoughtful, and Mom spent the entire evening talking about how some people just aren't relationship material. Eventually, I stopped showing up. I moved to another city, took night classes, got certified in financial forensics. I didn't tell anyone in the family. What was the point? I knew how the hierarchy worked. I was the background. Marianne was the headline. And yet, every so often, I'd get these messages from Mom. "Don't be a stranger. Your sister's doing amazing. Wish you could see her shine. Come home sometime if you've found the time to settle down." They never asked how I was, only whether I'd come and fit myself back into the empty space I left behind. Years passed. I built a life I didn't broadcast. Quiet, solid, mine. I worked for firms that managed wealth portfolios for people who didn't want their names in Forbes, but owned half the companies that were. I kept my head down and my profile lower. I didn't care if they never saw it. Until I got the wedding invitation. It arrived without a handwritten note. Just gold script and thick cardstock. I wasn't even in the bridal party. No speech, no special seat, just a guest. I almost tossed it. But then I remembered what Mom used to say when I cleaned up after everyone. Sometimes it's not about being noticed. It's about showing you know your place. So I went. Not to be noticed, but to see if they still looked at me like I belonged in the background. And I got my answer the moment Marianne's new father-in-law refused my handshake. There's something freeing about disappearing from people's expectations. After I left home for good, I stopped trying to win approval and started building a life I didn't need to explain. I stayed in the same city I'd moved to after high school, lived in a modest walk-up apartment above a bookstore, and took the night shift at a private tax firm while studying during the day. I got my certifications slowly: auditing, compliance, forensic analysis. By 26, I was working with white-collar crime investigators. By 30, I had my own network of clients who didn't want flashy solutions. They wanted silence, precision, and results. And I gave it to them. The irony? I was managing and protecting more money than my family could imagine. My name was never on a billboard, and that's how I liked it. I worked behind shell companies and blind trusts, consulted for discreet family offices, and learned how to keep billionaires out of scandal and tax courts. My strength was invisibility. I used to hate that feeling, being unseen. But in my world, it was power. My clients knew me as M. Wells. They never asked where I came from. They only cared about what I could keep from falling apart. And yet, somehow, I was still the failure in my family's eyes. Marianne, of course, had become a vision. Mom posted about her regularly. Her PhD, her nonprofit, her lovely new fiancé from a legacy family. They were what Mom called a real match, as if that reflected on her parenting score. The way she spoke about them, you'd think Marianne was marrying into royalty. I kept my distance until the invitation came. Then came the calls. Mom's voice on the phone was stiff. "Just so you know, it's formal, champagne colors, no black or red, please. And don't worry, you're not in the program. Less pressure that way." Less pressure, right. Then came the group message. Dress code details, hotel options, request not to bring a +1 unless previously approved. No one asked if I was seeing anyone. No one asked if I was well. They just assumed I'd fold into their little seating chart like a silent accessory. And so I made a decision. I'd show up, but not as the girl they used to scold for being too sharp or not soft enough. I wouldn't show up flashy. I wouldn't walk in with a designer gown or loud confidence. That wasn't who I was anymore. Instead, I wore a simple dove gray dress, tailored to fit, with a neckline just modest enough for a family wedding and just sharp enough to say, "I'm not here to play nice." I wore soft makeup, tied my hair back, and carried nothing but my invitation and my own name. When I arrived, the usher didn't know where to seat me. My name wasn't with the family. I was placed at a far table with distant acquaintances. My mother saw me, nodded politely, then turned away before she had to speak. It was like I'd walked into a painting that had no space for me. Every smile from Marianne was tight. Every comment from relatives carefully navigated around, asking what I did or where I lived. I was the question mark they hoped wouldn't speak. I didn't plan on speaking. Until the reception line. Until I stood in front of the groom's father, my hand outstretched. And he refused it. That single moment didn't surprise me, but it still landed like a blow to the ribs. Because no matter how far I'd come, no matter how much I'd built, they still saw only the version of me that was convenient to ignore. And somehow, even after all this time, that still stung. There's a specific kind of chill that follows public humiliation. Icy, slow, and silent. It wraps around your spine before you even fully register what's happened. When the groom's father refused to shake my hand, I stood there for half a second too long, trying to make sure I hadn't imagined it. But I hadn't. He looked directly past me and greeted the person behind me instead. I let my hand fall to my side, turned without a word, and walked away. I passed my mother on the way. She saw it. Her face stiffened, then softened into that practiced smile she'd used my whole life to pretend everything was fine. I knew she wouldn't say a word, not to him, not to me. I made my way to the back corner of the reception hall, next to the bar, where no one really lingered unless they needed a break from being gracious. I stood there, listening to the soft clink of glasses and low hum of small talk. I didn't cry, I didn't fume, I just took it in. They still saw me the same way. As someone who didn't belong in their carefully curated circle. Marianne's new family came from old money, legacy names, Ivy League degrees, private board memberships, and here I was, the sister they didn't know what to do with. The one without titles, accolades, or visible success. Marianne never told them who I really was. Of course not. That would have complicated the story she'd spent years perfecting. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. I took a glass and turned just slightly, scanning the room, not out of curiosity, but out of habit. I saw Marianne laughing too brightly near the cake, her new husband holding her waist like she might float off. I saw Mom talking to a well-dressed woman who kept glancing at me with concern. And then I saw him, an older gentleman across the room, silver-haired, distinguished, squinting at me like he recognized something. He stepped closer, whispered something to the groom's father, who immediately turned to look at me again. That was the moment, the shift. The same man who had just refused to touch me now looked uneasy, confused, then almost panicked. He leaned in, clearly trying to confirm something. The older man nodded once, firmly, and walked away. Seconds later, the father of the groom straightened his posture and began moving toward me. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just took another sip of champagne and waited. He stopped about 2 feet from me. "I owe you an apology," he said. His voice had lost its earlier bravado. "I wasn't aware you were that Marin Wells." I didn't smile. "What Marin Wells did you think I was?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, probably checking to see who was watching. "You're the one advising the Everston group?" That caught me off guard. Not many people outside closed circles knew that. But I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, trying again. "Would you join us at the family table?" And there it was. The pivot. The desperate scramble to pull me back into the room now that I had value. But I didn't answer. I just tilted my head slightly and let the silence sit. The power wasn't in what I could say. It was in what I didn't have to say anymore. He stepped back eventually, offering a stiff nod and returning to his circle with a little less certainty in his stride. Around me, the air had changed. People were glancing, whispering. Even Marianne had noticed. Her eyes met mine across the room. I saw the flicker of panic, confusion, then guilt. I didn't wave. I didn't approach. For once, they could wonder. And they did. I could feel it from across the room. The subtle shifts in body language. The way conversations thinned when I came near. The way certain men with finance backgrounds began to glance twice. At one point, a cousin's husband approached me, visibly nervous, and said, "I didn't realize you were in that world." "What world?" I asked. He fumbled. "The, trust management world. Real money, generational stuff." I offered a soft smile. "Oh, that world." The more I said less, the more they talked. A distant aunt suddenly remembered me fondly. A friend of the groom asked if I'd be attending the brunch the next morning. I declined. And when I caught sight of the seating coordinator sprinting to adjust place cards near the front, I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't just trying to make amends. They were trying to reposition themselves around me. I stayed near the edge of the room while the ripple effect moved outward. It was slow but unmistakable, the hush of whispers growing denser, a quiet current threading through the polished conversations. I could see people tilt their heads toward each other, subtle and practiced. A name spoken softly, a new realization forming. One of the groom's uncles made his way toward me, drink in hand, posture open. "You're Marin Wells," he said without question. "I am," I replied, matching his calm with my own. "I've heard your name more times than I can count, but I never connected it to here." He glanced around, his voice dropping. "You advised the Ashcroft restructuring?" I didn't answer. That one had been tight-lipped and buried under 8 layers of non-disclosure agreements. He didn't press. He didn't need to. The fact that he knew meant the right people were now putting puzzle pieces together. The father of the groom returned, this time with his wife beside him. She smiled, genuinely or nervously, I couldn't tell, and offered a handshake. "It's lovely to meet you. We weren't properly introduced earlier." I took her hand and nodded. She seemed like someone who had learned how to adapt quickly. Her husband, on the other hand, had clearly been shaken. The kind of man who had built his whole social worldview on titles and lineage, only to realize he'd publicly dismissed someone who helped manage the fortunes of the very families he tried to emulate. "I hope you'll accept our apology," he said again. This time I smiled, just enough to make him squirm. A few minutes later, the seating coordinator came over, apologetic and flustered. "Miss Wells, the family table has been rearranged. If you'd like to join—" "I'm fine where I am," I said. She hesitated. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I prefer a view from the margins." That line hung in the air like a bell strike. At some point, Marianne approached. Her steps were cautious, her expression tight. "I didn't know they didn't recognize you," she said. I didn't bother correcting her. She had known. She'd made sure of it. The story she told the groom's family was clean, unthreatening. She was the golden daughter who rose from modest beginnings, with a mother who sacrificed everything and a sister who drifted away into nothingness. It made her shine brighter. "You could have told them," I said. She looked away. "I thought you didn't want to be part of any of this." "I don't, but you did. And you chose the version of me that wouldn't get in your way." Silence. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." "No," I said. "You meant for it to happen quietly, like always." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. I could have pushed it, could have made a scene, told them all about the dinners I missed, the messages ignored, the things I'd built without ever being asked how. But what would be the point? I'd already been seen. The right people had noticed. And now the ones who'd spent their lives looking through me had no idea where to look anymore. I turned from my sister and stepped outside onto the balcony. The night air was cool, quiet. Somewhere behind me, music started up again. Someone made a toast. I didn't go back in. A text lit up on my phone. A message from an old client, now a board member of one of the groom's family foundations. "Heard you were at the wedding. They're trying to retain you. I told them they couldn't afford you." I turned off the screen. Let them scramble. I had nothing to prove. And yet, as I leaned against the railing and looked up at the night sky, there was a strange ache. Not anger, not even sadness. Just the quiet realization that even vindication has its limits. They had finally seen me, but it would never be the kind of seeing that came with understanding. Not really. The people I had once wanted love from. They only understood value when it walked in wrapped in money and fear. So no, I wouldn't go back in. Not now. Not ever. I didn't stay for the cake. I didn't wait for the send-off, or the fake hugs, or the chance for anyone to say they'd misunderstood. I slipped out quietly, just as I'd arrived. No spotlight, no grand statement. That was never my style. As I walked through the parking lot, the heels of my shoes clicking softly against the pavement, I realized I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter either. What I felt was done. Done trying to be included in a story that was never written for me. Done shrinking myself to make space for people who never offered me room. Done pretending that silence was the same as peace. They saw me now, but it wasn't me that had changed. It was just that someone finally whispered the truth out loud. The irony? I'd never needed them to understand. I just needed to be free from the need for their understanding. I reached my car, unlocked the door, and glanced once more at the venue behind me. The lights glowed softly through the windows. A celebration continued inside. But it wasn't mine. It never had been. And still, I had never felt more whole. On the drive home, I didn't replay what was said. I didn't linger on their faces or tone. I just thought about how many years I'd spent waiting for someone to say, "You matter," and how long it took me to say it to myself first. Sometimes you don't get closure. You get clarity. And sometimes that's more than enough. Because the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't building success. It was walking away from people who only saw it after it served them.